Hi, everybody. Raina here from Blue Cypress Books with our next episode of Book Banter. And I am so excited about this Book Banter. You all have no idea. We're going to be talking to Annabelle Tometich about her debut book, a memoir, The Mango Tree, a memoir of Fruit, Florida, and Felony. And guess what? She is from Fort Myers. That is my hometown. That is where I am from. She was born and raised there, still lives there. And this memoir was so oh God, it was like weird to hear your hometown talked about at all, but she nails it, puts words to things I have felt for years and did not know how to express. And I can't wait to talk to her. So if you have any questions or comments or anything during the event, type them into the comments below and we will answer them during the event. But without further ado, I'm going to welcome Annabelle Tometich to Book Banter. Yay!
Hi! Thank you so much for having me, Raina.
Oh my gosh, I am so happy that this all worked out for you to be here and for us to talk, because truly, as soon as I heard that, I was reading about this book months and months and months ago, because Bookseller, we get all these upcoming books, information. And it said Fort Myers. I was like, I have to get my hands on this.
Yeah.
Clearly, I have to read it. And then I'm reading it and I just love it. And there's so many little weird things that overlap with the two of us. I'm so happy for you to be here.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I think a big part of when I first wrote this book is I have really never read a book set in Fort Myers. There's books set in Sanibel and Captiva and the Barrier Islands and, the general South Florida kind of area. But I was if we're going to be, one of the first, we got to do it right. We got to represent this weird little hometown of ours properly. And I hope
you nailed it. You nailed it for sure.
Yeah.
And, I didn't even read your bio in the intro, which I'm sorry about, but I want to read this first part because I'd love to hear how you got to journalist and then author, because the first line is that you went from medical school flunky to line cook to journalist to author. And how did you really get to journalist? Because that journalist to author is not a huge leap. I see that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It was in my head. I was like, wait, what? Oh, yeah. But looking back, the journalist to author was the most natural of those transitions. Right. But yeah, I was supposed to go to medical school, and I took a year off and traveled and ate a bunch of delicious food and read a couple of different Anthony Bourdain books at the time, and just kind of fell in love with that world and was I'd never really had my heart in medicine. It was just kind of the logical thing that a daughter of a Asian mother does in some ways. And so, I got into restaurants. I started working as a line cook at the Iguana Mia by the Edison Mall, which you probably spent a birthday or two at.
Okay, when you don't say Iguana Mia.
That's true. I say a Mexican restaurant.
You say a Mexican restaurant by the mall, and I was like, well, there's no. I mean, it has to be it, but I didn't know. So
the neon green building of Iguana Mia, the siren song call of the chimichangas at Iguana Mia.
Yes. So true.
Yeah.
Okay, and for everyone who does not know, Iguana Mia is a typical sort of American Mexican restaurant. Everyone goes. Family establishment, but on your birthday, you eat free, and they put the sombrero on you and make you take a Polaroid picture. I'm sure you could opt out, but after they've given you your food for free, you're like, I guess this is worth it.
The picture. Yeah, I took many pictures there as a server and as the cook. You don't have to, which was why I liked the line cook part, because you don't have to deal with the people at all. I was just behind the scenes and doing your own thing, but. Yeah, so I worked in restaurants including high school. It was almost a decade, of different parts in restaurants. And then I opened a little catering company, and this was in the mid 2000s. And everybody in Southwest Florida had just tons of real estate money to spend and, lavish on various things. And we were in theory, at least, we were a breakfast lunch catering company. We didn't I think we did maybe one on the books job. And I was looking for a night job, and a friend of mine was the career placement officer for one of the local colleges. And I was like, just keep your eye out for anything that opens up at nighttime. And she's like, well, there's a position at the news press as an agate clerk. And I was like, I don't really know what that is. But she's like, the hours are 7 to midnight, 3 or 4 days a week. And I was like, perfect.
Done.
Check. Done. Send me in. And I went and interviewed for it with actually another person from Fort Myers High School. And she had like a background in journalism. And she was the logical choice, like by far, was this other person. And they hired both of us, like, because it was 2005, and like, whatever, we'll just hire both of you. Sure. So yeah, I backed my way into journalism for sure. And I was working on the sports desk for several years. Just like, honestly, I would take like shuffleboard scores. The local RV parks would call in their shuffleboard scores and I would type them up, and like the local country clubs would call in their hole-in-ones and I would type those up. And that was my job as an agate clerk, was to add those stats to like the Major League Baseball stats and the NFL stats and all that stuff. And it ran in the back page of the sports section, which was the agate page back then. And I always say, like, if you just sit in a newsroom long enough, like stories will just find you, like they'll just fall into your lap. So, eventually a few stories found their way to me, and I was not a good writer then, but I got to keep writing, and that was kind of the beauty of journalism, is that you got to be bad for, until you got better, you were allowed to be bad, and like these stories ran, and, you learned really quickly, like, oh, that could have been better. And then you figure out how to improve it, how to rework it, and how to tell a story. So yeah, journalism was, it was not where I meant to go, but it ended up being this huge gift. And, I really fell in love with writing through journalism at the news press.
So my grandma worked at the news press.
Yeah.
Way before you were at the news press. Right. But she worked the overnights and like moved the papers. Like, she didn't write or anything. She literally like moved all the papers coming off the huge printing presses.
Rolls of paper back there that were delivered by the railroad cars. That was the reason railroad tracks butt up to like the old news press building, is because the reams of paper were being delivered, and they're massive. Yeah, it was a whole like village, like in the heyday, like it was like the number 2 or 3 employer in Lee County was the Fort Myers News Press. It was like the hospital system and the news press. Like that was one, either 1 or 2 or 3. It was top 5. And it's sad what's happened to journalism in so many ways. Devastating, and is another way to put it. But
yes,
it was a thriving, like, we had a full service cafeteria at one point. Yep. We had like a night shift cafeteria and a day shift cafeteria, like, because there were so many people who would work overnight to get like your grandmother to get the paper out, right, and deliver it every morning. It was like an actual community for years and years, for decades.
I remember one time she took me in just to show me around. And it's so fuzzy because I was so young, but I just remember the massive machines, and it was loud. And I remember seeing the cafeteria, because I was a kid. So the things that I understood, she's like, "Oh, you're here, sorry." So I remember seeing these few things. It's just amazing. But my mom, I was actually there. I was in Fort Myers for Easter, and she was telling me that like, she doesn't even know where the news press is anymore, like where they actually work out of.
We have I shouldn't say we, because I'm not there anymore. I took a buyout in December of 2022, but the new office is off of Metro Parkway. It's like one floor of like a multi-level SunTrust Bank building. Or Suncoast, I'm not sure. One of the Suns.
On the corner, kind of like close to the corner
from the school board. Yeah, like Colonial and Metro area. But like I said, it used to be like an entire street corner that was, just devoted to the news press, and now it's one floor of a bank building. So
yeah,
smaller.
That's just like a few offices.
I know. Yeah.
So one thing in your book that as you're describing Fort Myers, you describe like the right and wrong side of the tracks and the right and wrong side of the river.
Yeah.
And this, a lot of times, like, you don't put your finger on that. Like it, that there's like a better area of town and a better side of the, I guess it's like where everyone just wants to be. And I don't remember knowing like really why. you
Right.
wanted to be there growing up,
Yeah.
right? Which is just where people want to be. And when you said that in your book, you talk about being like you on the right or the wrong side of the river, but the right side of the tracks.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly where that is. And then like I grew up, like a bulk of my childhood was on the right side of the river, but the wrong side of the tracks. It's like,
Right.
wow, that's just wild. Like, had you always kind of thought of it that way, or were you trying to look when writing this book for like ways to
Yeah. I was trying to, like if you've never ever, and I feel like most towns kind of have like some kind of plotting device like that, where you have an x-axis and a y-axis of like, where you like the most desirable and the least desirable. And there's kind of these middle spots that, the majority of people fall into, right? Because that's where you can afford to live.
Sure.
And I was just kind of thinking, like, if no one's ever been here, because, we're not Orlando or Miami, like, how do you kind of explain this like social hierarchy or this racial caste hierarchy, whatever it is that exists in this town of ours, in like simple terms that like people can understand if you've never been there. So I think when that clicked in, and it was also kind of like something that I thought of as a kid too, of just like that, a lot of this book is like a quest for like normality and like trying to be normal and trying to fit in and everything. And like, as soon as we got to like that quadrant of where it was like, oh my gosh, we're on the right side of the river and the right side of the railroad tracks, like we've made it, right? And that's when everything falls apart, So
yeah. And that's wild, because when my family moved and we ended up being on the right side of the river and the right side of the tracks, when we're in South Fort Myers, it didn't fix anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know that your mom, because your mom is very like
integral
in your book, as first of all, as moms are in general usually, but also like my dad died at a young age and your dad died at a young age. And when that happens, I think that, the single parent, the parent whoever's left behind is obviously going to become a huge part of the kids' lives, but also then they like have to too. Like, I feel like there's not.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't get a choice. Yeah. I mean, just to like go back a little bit, so the book centers on this 2015 incident where my Filipina mother used her BB gun to shoot at a man who she claimed was stealing mangoes from her yard in Fort Myers, Florida. And she missed, no one physically was hurt. But it raised, this question of, from my breaking news reporter at the news press, of like, is this your mother? Did she really shoot this man over mangoes? And the book is kind of trying to answer that question of like, well, yeah, like, of course she did. Like, do you have any idea how much that tree like meant to her? But then also like, it's complicated, which is, I think what I told him at the time was like, oh my gosh, Mike, it's so complicated. And that's what I'm trying to, convey in these 300 pages, is the complications of all of that. But yeah, there's like, understanding my mother is kind of like this like quest of my life to maybe also understand myself, which is maybe something I didn't really realize until writing this book, of like, why do I keep coming back to her? Why does it, why do these stories keep revolving around her? And, she did like, for all of her faults, which she is not, she is not a fault-free woman. There's this like tremendous grief that she suffered. And there's this tremendous loss that she suffered of, not just leaving her homeland and leaving this, sprawling family who like loved her and respected her behind, but then also, coming here and trying to establish a family, but then also, her husband dying and her brother dying, and, just the struggle to make it here when you don't have any of those connections that like people typically stand on to build, to build wealth and build family and build lives here. She didn't have any of that. She just had, some kids and a bunch of fruit trees in her yard. So, yeah.
And when I read that line, like, of course she did, like, did she, of course she did. Obviously she did whatever it is. She probably did it because mango trees, not just like, we had a mango tree.
Of course you did. Yes.
Of course you did.
Once again, duh.
You got like an orange tree, some sort of citrus tree, or like a mango tree. Those are your two Florida options. Or both, if you're lucky. Or both. Yes. Yes, the lucky ones get both. But like understanding that that they mean something. And a lot of times, like it is not a fruit bearing tree, but here in New Orleans, like we have this magnolia tree that we planted like the year that we moved into this house. And like I'm attached to it. I'm attached to it. Like if somebody was coming and trying like cutting a branch off, I'd be like, what the hell? What are you what are you doing? You know, and then you add in the idea that it's like a fruit tree that you can actually like sustain life off of. Like you could take that and eat it. And I was like, of course she did.
Of course she did.
Yeah. She's attached to it and she's upset and she's going to do whatever it is that she thinks is going to make them go away and not come back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And, you know, I mean, this silly part of all of it is like, if like the people who just asked her, you know, like she has a plethora of fruit trees and mango trees specifically in her yard, you know, so she's more than happy. Like she'll usually bring boxes to her neighbors and things like that. And she would we had a whole like mango pipeline where, you know, her mangoes would go to her friends in New York and San Francisco and places where they can't have their own mangoes. And, you know, I think that's like a very common thing for, you know, South Asians in South Florida specifically, is to like if you go to the post office in Fort Myers, this happened to me a couple of summers ago because I was sending like boxes of mangoes as thank yous to like people who had given me blurbs and stuff for the book. And I'm standing in line at the Pagefield post office with my little box of mangoes. I'm sitting with my friend in Louisville, Kentucky. And I get to the counter and the man is like, you're the 6th person to ship mangoes in the last hour. And I was like, it's mango season. Like, this is what we do, you know? And, you know, like my friends who are Vietnamese and my friends who are Taiwanese and, you know, their parents, you know, strive for the same things. Like they're here, they're in a climate that's like their home climate. And they wanted to take advantage of that and, you know, create these little kind of bits of home that reminded them of, you know, reminded my mom for sure of where she came from. And, you know, and the funny thing is she never had, like, she grew up in like inner city Manila. She grew up like in like the city of like the metro of Manila. So she never had fruit trees growing up, but that was like her aspiration, like her, you know, like that was what she hoped to one day have, is like enough land, you know, outside of the city to grow mangoes. But she got it in Fort Myers, Florida instead.
And be able to kind of share and give like something so simple, like if you can get this tree to take root and to survive, then you have all of this abundance to be able to share with your family or your friends or whoever. And that's a special thing. Just ask. Just to ask. Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you like get to writing the book? Like why? I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
But so good, excellent idea. But why? But what made, you know, because lots of people like these types of things happen and you're just sitting there and you're like, go on with your life. Right? What is it that makes you go, I'm going to start writing this down?
Yeah. It was definitely like, it's like half joking that I call it a midlife crisis because it's pretty serious. Like it was like, I would not say my writing process was very healthy. Like because it was like during the pandemic that I wrote most of it. It was like June to September of 2020. I was just like staying up to the wee hours of the morning, like tapping this book out. Cause like I figured out what it was. And the moment I figured out what it was, like I couldn't stop writing. But getting to that figuring out was a whole process in and of itself because, so in 2019, I was interviewing to be, I had a job offer actually to be the restaurant critic at the Tampa Bay Times, which is how journalism works. Like you start at a smaller market and you move up to a larger market, and their critic had just gone to the Washington Post, you know, so like that's kind of like the journalism pipeline. And I wanted like so badly to take that job. I'd been doing restaurant reviews and stuff for 15 years, almost 15 years, I think 13, 14 years at that point. And, you know, I was like ready for something, you know, something else, something more. And then the logistics of it all kind of sank in of like, well, like my family is in Fort Myers, you know, and my kids are in Fort Myers and my mother's in Fort Myers and my mother-in-law is in Fort Myers, my husband, you know, like everything that I loved and knew was in Fort Myers. And at the time it didn't make sense to kind of pluck all that up and, you know, transplant it, even if it's just 2 hours north in Tampa, it didn't make sense. And so I had to turn down the job. And then the midlife crisis started. And like, what are you doing with your life? Like, what are you, are you just going to review these same, 50, 60 restaurant spaces over and over again? Like, if you're staying in Fort Myers, like, what can you do to like feel like it's something of like something else, something different and bigger or whatever. And then like really naively, I was like, oh, we'll just write a book. Like,
sure.
It's pretty easy, right?
Sounds good.
Yeah. And like the very first like versions of this were a cookbook. Because I was a food writer. And so like food writers write cookbooks, even though I was not a recipe developer, I was a restaurant critic and like I did like profiles and things like that. I wasn't developing recipes, but I was like in my head, I was like, I have all these really quirky essays of like growing up in Robert E. Lee County, Florida as a half Filipina girl. And this like tyrannical mother of mine, like if I could intersperse those with like recipes that are kind of like tangentially related to these little essays that I put together, like it could be interesting. And I put together like a whole proposal. I had everything ready to go. I sent it to agents, literary agents, and they were like, I don't know what this is. And I was like, I also really don't know what this is. So good call. And then a really close friend of mine, who's also from Fort Myers, she's an author, Artis Henderson. She has another book coming out, but she wrote Unremarried Widow. And she was like one of my, first readers. And she was like, I enjoy the recipes. They're interesting. But if you just get rid of them and connect these essays, you have a really strong memoir. And I was like, but I'm not writing a memoir. I'm writing a cookbook and you need recipes for a cookbook. She's like, no. She's like, this is a memoir. And, if you can just figure out, how to get these essays together, you have a really good book. And I guess she might've been right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she was onto something.
Might have been onto something. Artists. Yeah.
So also, as you're writing the book, I love how like your mom's, she's like this through character to tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
As it's going along, I was like, okay, this is really about her mom, but then like it's not. It is. She's what you use to tell about yourself and where you are and where you came from.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
I was as much of you in that original version.
No, because I was a journalist, and it was like the very first. So the first chapter in the book is the first thing I ever wrote for the book, like the pit, the prologue kind of chapter, and it started out. It was called The Mango Shooter, and in 2015, when you Googled mango shooter on like God's internet, you got my mother's mugshot as it ran in the pages of the news press. That was the first link. And then the second link was an Absolute vodka cocktail recipe for an Absolute vodka mango shooter. And I was like, that's funny. Like this is gold. Like,
the book is writing itself already. Right,
we go. So that was the one thing that I just, like this idea of like me sitting in this courtroom and facing this like, really humiliating moment with my mother. And like, it's going to be written about in the paper where I work. And then I Google it and I get a recipe for and it wasn't even a recipe. It was like, take a shot of vodka, eat a piece of mango. And I was like, we could do better than this.
The laziest drink recipe ever.
Drink. Yeah. So yes, that was how it always kind of started. And that became the very first chapter, but in that cookbook essay sense, it was very easy to make it about the food and about my mother and about, other things, and not necessarily having to look at myself at all, which is kind of critical when you start calling it a memoir. And that was definitely, that was a process. I think that was a lot of what we did, in revisions with my agent and revisions with my editor was like, you have these, they would tell me like, you have these beautiful scenes, but what does it mean? What does it mean to you? Like, how does this connect, to this like longing and this desire to like detach yourself from your mom, but then also like understand her. And so that was a lot of what we did in revision was just trying to like put those pieces together and like figure out what they mean, which is like therapy, that's like years of therapy right there.
It's a process. Again, being the oldest, which I'm the oldest as well. and you end up with a lot of these sort of like responsibilities, and sometimes very like official, like now this is your thing to do, and other times just like not, you're just absorbing these bits because you know how to do it better than everyone else in the house, right? So like you're able to fill in those gaps, and that separation then,
right,
I feel you.
yeah,
I feel you. You gotta feel that out. Like I said, I went home for Easter. It's great. I love it. Like we're everything is wonderful now, right? There's that process of like trying to figure out who you are in this space that has been so like weirdly enmeshed in a way, in some ways, but then also like doing your own thing in some of these other ways. It's very weird when you're put in that sort of that suddenly single parent household.
Right, for sure. Yes. Yeah. I definitely struggled to kind of figure out like, you know, just as a kid, kind of taking over as like, mom too, or like, dad 2.0, like whatever that role was as it felt to me was, I mean, but there's also like not time to think about it. Like you just do it because you're in it, so you just do it. And then you kind of look back on it, and that's when you think like, oh my gosh, like that little girl was struggling. That little girl was like trying so hard to like balance all this stuff and like keep her grades up and, please her mom with, these good grades and things like that. But then also like make sure that like the family's not falling apart, because our family very easily could have fallen apart. And, I think if I wasn't like the Virgo personality that I am, and not to say that I was perfect by any means, because I was like, I learned from my mother. I was mean to my sister and brother, because that was what I knew, and I'm constantly apologizing, and like to their friends, I'm like, I am so sorry that I was so mean to you back then. Like I was a mean little like second mom, 12-year-old, like running around trying to, but and at the same time, it's like looking back, it's like she was stressed out. Like that little girl was stressed to the max, which again, also my mother was, like she's doing the same thing and trying to make it work. And, in a land where she's not, used to the customs and used to the culture. And, so I try to have like as much grace as possible for like little Annabelle, but sometimes I'm like, she was going through it. Like,
right. And it's true. You don't notice at the time, you're just sort of doing the thing. You're doing the thing. And even now as an adult, like you'll get into things out, like I won't speak for you, but I get into things, right? And I'm just doing the thing. And then at some point I'm like, the better you get at like catching yourself going, what am I doing?
Right.
But like as a kid, you just like doing the thing. And I would say that for me reading this, again, there's like so many layers that I really identified with, not just like the history and geography and culture of Fort Myers, but also this aspect of it when you were talking about having, take over a lot of the household responsibilities and different things like that. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And then like living in a world now where it's very different for my son, which is great. And he's living his best life, in my opinion. But like, I got a job at 15 to help pay the bills. Like that's
right. Yeah.
Like that's what I was doing with my spare money. And he's like, do I have to get a job? So I'm like, I guess I've given him a leg up in that, a little better.
A lot of people ask me like, will your kids ever read the book? And I was like, I hope they do. I was like, I want them to know exactly how much worse I had it than they had it. I want them to know, because I tell them all the time, I'm like, do you have any idea what Lola would do? Lola is what we call my mom in Tagalog. And I was like, do you have any idea what Lola would do if I talked to her the way you're talking to me right now? I was like, I'd have no teeth. Like I would be out on the street, I would have nothing. And, they just roll their eyes and whatever. But I'm like, one day you're going to read this and you're going to understand like that it was, we have broken some cycles in this family. Like my sister, brother, and I, like all, like, we have done a pretty good job of being like, okay, that was the past, and we're not going to let it, we're not going to let it inform us and the way that, like, we're knock on wood, the way we raise our kids. So,
well, I mean, having your kids read this, it's a beautiful like document of your family. Yeah. I mean, you don't, and like, I have feelings about your family members like learning different things and like as you're going along through this story, but you did this really great job of being like honest about what is happening, but also it's not judgy. You don't seem to be judging anyone, and I feel like that's a really testament to how far you've come and being able to look back.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure at that time in some of these, you'd be like, what are you doing? Like you'd be, there is judgment, but then like being able to go past it and look back and write this out. It's a beautiful document of your family. Like for your kids and other family members or whatever to read this is a gift is the word that is coming to mind. So
thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think there was definitely, that was part of my, everyone says when you start to write a book, like just write the book that you need to write, like it don't worry if it's ever going to sell, if it's ever going to go anywhere. Like, there's a chance that no one else will ever read it, but at least you have this tome or this like, documentation of things. So I definitely went into it with that mindset. And I think also like a big part of it was just kind of like, not, I wouldn't say resurrecting our father, but like, creating a version, like painting a vision of our father for my sister and brother, because, they didn't, like, I was 9 when he passed. My sister was 5. Our brother was 9 months old. And so they don't, they have like photograph memories of him. And even my memories, it's a memory, so it's my memory. But so, I felt this kind of like obligation to like, not just get the Fort Myers part right, but then also like try to get our dad right, like to the best of my recollection, and, talking to my mom about certain situations and trying to get, trying to just confirm that these things that I remembered were, also what she remembered, and trying to be as journalistic as possible as you can with the memoir. Cause there's no, like there's photographs and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of, evidence or anything that we can like go back to. But yeah. Yeah.
And so much of those types of things, if you're not talking about like a famous person or something, there isn't all this documentation. There's like what your mom remembers. There's what his mom remembers. There's what you remember. And then like, you're just piecing all these bits together with like, the few regular person documents there are in the world.
Yeah.
And
was, my dad was an only child. His parents both died when I was young also. So it's like that whole side of my family is lost a little bit. So I'm like, maybe one of the, maybe a next book is like figuring out my Yugoslavian roots. Cause I'm still not sure like where in Yugoslavia my grandfather came from on my dad's side, because like his, Ellis Island stuff just says like Yugoslavia. Cause at the time it was all, all these countries were still massed together. So I'm like, what was it? Serbia? Was it Bosnia Herzegovina? Like where in the old Yugoslavia was he from? So yeah, that'd be interesting one day to figure that out. But
yeah, well, and just the fun research project of the whole thing. Even like if a book never comes out of it, which it should because you're a good writer. But if it doesn't, just the research aspect of it alone.
Yeah, and then you have more documentation of your family. So
maybe you can take a trip to Yugoslavia. I don't know. That's like, it's like any reason to take another vacation. I'm in. So
yeah.
So we're coming close to the end of Book Banter, but I have a yearbook that I was thinking maybe
from middle school.
Share. Yes. Okay.
For yearbook.
So I for everybody out there, I read the book months and months ago, and I picked up on Dunbar, but I didn't really put together the timeline. And then I was listening to the audio in preparation for this week, this interview, and I was like, wait a minute, the timeline. I think we went to middle school together. Like, not only did we go to the same middle school, which was cool, but I was like, we went to the middle school together. So I came home at the same time, and I have the yearbook, the Dunbar Middle School yearbook. And then I was like, I tabbed it. So yeah. So do you want to go first? Because I'm going to show mine too. So it's not just
yeah. Oh, I'll go first. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was a cute 8th grader.
That's normal. Yeah, honestly, I do feel like yours is better than mine.
No.
No, I do.
This is also post, because I write about my Whitney Houston perm in the book. So this is when the Whitney Houston perm had grown out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Ignore my horrible fingernails.
Where are we?
So that
there she is.
There.
Yeah.
Right there. Oh my God.
Right. I had pieces at that point. And I think I had on I think I was kind of getting grungy. So I think I had on
it's the plaid.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's a vest too. Like, it doesn't have sleeves, if I remember correctly.
It's that you can't really see in the photo,
Okay.
but it is definitely a plaid.
Yes.
It is definitely a plaid.
Yeah,
Now,
flannel, despite it being Florida, it's a plaid flannel.
Yes, I thought I actually thought that this might be my flannel photo as well because I have one. It's got to be around the same time.
Yeah.
And when I was trying to think of the timeline in my head before I looked up the photo, I was like, oh, that's probably the one. It's not. It's just a black top, but I do have the hair. Look at that short hair right there. Oh my gosh.
So good. Yeah. Yeah. And the buzz up the back, right?
Yes. Because that Florida heat, you know, I was just like,
bothered.
Go with it. Just go with it.
Bothered with the hair.
That's the shortest my hair's ever been, but I remember it fondly.
Yeah. Yeah. The 1994 yearbook came out.
Yes.
We're done. We're good.
I couldn't just I had to show people. I was telling everybody about it, so we had to share. And it's the only year we were in the same school at the same time, because I didn't start Dunbar until 7th grade, and you're a year ahead of me in 8th grade. And then we went to different high schools. Yeah, I went to Cypress Lake, and you went to Fort Myers High, right?
Yeah. I have my Fort Myers yearbooks. I don't have any of my Dunbar yearbooks somehow. I need to go through my mom's house. I'm sure they're there somewhere. But
from what I've learned in the book, your mom keeps everything. Yeah. So it's in there somewhere.
There's a good chance it's in there somewhere. Yeah. Or there's a chance that she was too cheap to buy it that year. So
right, it's one or the other. These are the two possibilities, but hopefully
we're not buying yearbooks.
You don't need that. When you get to high school, maybe you'll remember those, but you're not going to remember those people anyway.
Exactly. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's like being interviewed by one.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Amazing.
Well, Annabelle, it was really great talking to you.
Yeah.
And next time I'm down in Fort Myers, I will send you a little message. I'd be like, maybe we can grab coffee or something.
Maybe we can go to Guadamia and get
my god,
ice cream together. Yes. Everybody's invited.
Yes, we're doing it. That's happening. All right, y'all. I am going to put the link to the mango tree down here in the comments. If you want a copy, and you do, follow that link, and we will mail them to you anywhere in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love this. Yeah.
Yay.
Go
for it. Go for Myers. Number 1. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.